Biden's social spending bill is taking shape as negotiations continue to whittle the price tag down further and further. Dems have so far said no to a billionaire tax, drug price controls, and free community college. Despite major public support among constituents for the programs, Senate Democrats have also recently decided to drop paid family leave and medical leave from the spending package as well. David Sirota analyzes the policy failures in a new piece for Rolling Stone and condemns Democrats backpedaling on their promises to American families and workers. Bernie Sanders recently said if Democrats fail to pass a real agenda that helps people more and more, people are going to drift towards conspiracy theories, authoritarianism, and even violence. David notes that if history shows any sign, Senator Sanders is right. This piece is published in conjunction with the launch of Meltdown, a new 8-episode Audible series that's out now. Founder of the Daily Poster, David Sirota, joins us to discuss his piece and new podcast series, Meltdown, further. David, congrats on the podcast and welcome to Rising.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we knock these guys around relentlessly, I did want to talk about one piece of good, interesting news that came out. There's been this fight mostly between the Center for American Progress and its kind of wonkish DC allies and Matt Bruning, who runs an independent progressive policy think tank over the child care bill. Bruning has been saying that the way that you're designing this child care subsidy bill is garbage, and it's going to leave a lot of middle-class people actually unable to find quality child care, and if they can find it, it'll be at a much higher price, and because of the way you've written the bill, they won't be able to get subsidies. You're going to make their lives actively worse in a devastating way. Cap was pushing back against him, saying, fake news, you're a liar. Basically, this is not true. They've now renegotiated the bill, apparently taken into his concerns into consideration, and now, as long as you're making up to 250% of the median state income, so people in New Jersey will get a little bit more subsidy than people in West Virginia, then you're covered then with a little kind of a graduated cliff after that. So it addresses the problem he said they had created. What was your reaction to watching this unfold? The Democratic establishment wonks kind of lying their way through it, and then in the end, them fixing the bill to his specifications.
Well, I think that is certainly a good development that that Bruning's criticism was implemented, or at least taken into account in the White House proposal. I think it speaks to something larger, that you definitely in the Democratic establishment in Washington, among think tanks, among congressional staffers and the like, there is, you call it a wonkishness, and that wonkishness often translates into complexity. That complexity is apparently perceived as smarts in policy circles in the Democratic Party. And I think that what we've learned over and over again is that when you make programs so complex, means testing, work requirements and the like, what ends up happening is you end up burdening people with all sorts of paperwork and red tape. You make it harder to access benefits. And perhaps maybe that's actually the unstated point, that you're actually trying to make benefits harder to access rather than simplified. And I think out there in the country, a lot of people are sick and tired of being burdened by that red tape when the government is offering any kind of meager benefit. I think it was Dave Dayen way back many years ago in the New Republic who said that Americans face a huge tax on their time, that there are so many loopholes and so much red tape and so many hoops to jump through just to get access to the basic services of government. And I think this was an example, that back and forth is an example, and it's good to see that the White House apparently took into consideration those concerns.
So what's your argument, I hope you can expand on this for us, that not delivering some of these promises, if they don't make it into what eventually gets passed, that is going to harm democracy? What's the argument there?
Sure, and this is the argument at the core of the Rolling Stone essay and the core of the podcast series that we reported out over the last 16 months, which is to say that when a party asks voters to give it power, to put it into office. And it says, in exchange for your vote, we will provide X, Y, and Z to materially improve your lives economically. And then that party gets into power and decides to side with its corporate donors and not deliver on those promises. Then the meta message that is being sent to voters is, your vote doesn't actually matter. So that when the party then goes to those voters in the next election and says, well, at least elect us to defend democracy, many voters can end up saying, look, I just used democracy to put you in power. And you said you were going to deliver on these campaign promises, and I don't feel like you've delivered on those promises. I don't feel like my life has materially improved. So that is the link between economic policy, campaign promises, and democracy.
But won't Democratic insiders just say, we wanted to deliver you these things, but you didn't vote for enough of us, and so you have to vote more of us into office so that we have a high enough margin to actually do the things we said we would do and we want to do?
Sure. I mean, that's the strategy. There's always a fundraising email, always a promise that the change that we promised in the last election is just over the horizon from the next election. I think one of the big lessons out of the Obama era, 2009, 2010, which our podcast series hones in on, is that they had 59 or at one point 60 Senate votes, and they ultimately decided to pass a massive and fortify a massive bailout to the financial industry. I mean, that was started in the Bush administration. It was preserved and protected by the Obama administration and directed. This is a key point. That bailout was directed to financial institutions, not really to millions of people who were struggling. They had 60 Senate votes. They pared back their stimulus bill. They gutted their own Wall Street reform bill. I could give you the litany. But the point is that I believe that voters rightly say the party in power is responsible for what the government is doing. If the party in power cannot deliver on its campaign promises or refuses to deliver on its campaign promises, then voters are going to continue voting for change.
And so Bernie Sanders has actually talked explicitly about this in the last couple of days with regard to the drug price negotiations provision, which Democrats ran on in 2006 when they took the House. In 2018, they encouraged all of their candidates running for Congress to focus on lowering prescription drug prices rather than Medicare for all. They said that's what polls better, promised lower prescription drug prices. They ran again on it in 2020. And what Sanders has been saying is, and this is almost a direct quote, he said, why do we have elections? Like, if 80+% of the country agrees with this, if we've run on this as our top issue, if we've been elected on it, and then we don't do it, he said, quote, why are we holding elections? Why are we asking people to come out and vote and participate in the political process if we can't deliver on this? And I'm wondering from your podcast, what links you identified from the 2008-2009 period and the failure to deliver after that, and the rise of anger and authoritarianism that we've seen since then?
Sure. I mean, I think some of the big ones are Obama promised, for instance, to reform bankruptcy laws to allow the judges to write down people's mortgages so that they could be kept in their homes. Right now, that's still not allowed, and he ended up essentially allowing, and some Congress people argue joining them in gutting that proposal. There was Obama saying he was going to hold bankers who created the crisis accountable. Not one banker was prosecuted. There was a push to break up the banks, to at least get their size under control. The Obama administration threw in to kill that. There was Obama saying we're going to directly help homeowners. The homeowner assistance programs were crumbs, and they were terribly crafted, and they really didn't deliver much help to homeowners. The point in remembering all this is it's not just ancient history, it's to remember what happened after. They got shellacked in the Tea Party election. They got shellacked by Donald Trump. And it was Steve Bannon who said that the legacy of the financial crisis is Donald Trump. And the way I interpret that is that the legacy of the Democrats' response They're throwing in with their Wall Street donors. The legacy of that part of the financial crisis was the thing that allowed Donald Trump to portray himself as the guy who was going to drain the swamp. And the point in remembering that now is to remember that if Democrats repeat that history, they should expect the other part of the history to repeat as well, either with Trump or a Trump clone in the next election.
David, thanks for talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
And the podcast is called Meltdown, and you have to get it on Audible. Is it Audible exclusive?
That's right, on Audible.
Okay.
Yes, on Audible.
All right. Well,
thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll have more Rising right after this.